Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're back again today, Chaz and I. How's it going, Chaz?
How's it going?
And after talking about some multicolor cards from Eldritch Moon yesterday, we are jumping into the black cards from the set. And I'm super excited because we get to talk about a Planeswalker right off the bat. Card number one, Liliana, the Last Hope. Another 3-mana Liliana. So, what do you think, Chaz? Can this hold up to the first 3-mana Liliana?
Probably not. But the good news is there's a really good track record of 3 converted mana cost planeswalkers that see play in multiple formats. There's light at the end of the tunnel for Liliana.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's no way it's anywhere near Liliana the Veil. I don't think there's even an argument, and it probably shouldn't be as good as Liliana the Veil.
Right,
Liliana
yeah,
the
I
Veil
think
is
that's
really
a
good.
Point there. Yeah.
But at 3 mana, this card is better than it looks, I think. My initial reaction to this card was pretty negative. I was really hoping we would get something big and flashy, since a lot of the story of the set is about Liliana, and it just doesn't read all that flashy. Like, all the abilities are fine, and you can see how it generates value, but they don't really jump off the page like, oh my god, that's such a great Planeswalker. But after sitting on it a couple days, thinking about it, I think this card will see play, and I think it'll be pretty good. So even though my initial reaction wasn't that great, I think it's better than it looks.
Yeah, I think it's deceptively powerful, and it's kind of subtle. Like I said, you can't name a 3 converted mana cost planeswalker that didn't see play, at least in standard. And that's a kind of short list, but really powerful list. You have cards like Domri, you have cards like Ajani, Call of the Pride. So they usually all end up getting the green light for standard. And you're absolutely right. I think it was just the build-up and the hype about Liliana returning. We're definitely getting Liliana. There's this storyline arc of Liliana having to battle Emrakul to save Innistrad, and it gets revealed, and it's just not like off the page awesome. But that's okay. I think if that's the only negative here, then we're doing okay. It does power down some interesting cards in standard, at least for now, like Sylvan Advocate. We talked about that in the multicolor video, and the ultimate, while it probably will take quite some time to get there just from +1. I don't know if you even want to try, but the ultimate will eventually end the game. So I think all around it's okay, and okay is fine too.
Yeah, I think it's a card that I feel like I need to withhold some of my judgment on until I actually get to play with it, because it's risky to just write off a 3-mana Planeswalker, because like we both said, they just have such a long track record of being standard playable. So I have a suspicion that it's going to see some play somewhere, but I really want to actually run it through some matches and see how it works out on the battlefield before I really make any firm judgments on it. Our next card is Tree of Perdition. So I'll jump in on this one first. I really like this card, and not just because I like Against the Odds and cards like that, but being able to exchange an opponent's life total with the card's toughness has some real potential. Maybe not now, but it does line up with Triskaidekaphobia, and there are some cool tricks to shrink down Tree of Perdition's toughness in response to the ability, which can get your opponent all the way down to 1 life even with some effects. So while I don't know if it'll be good enough, there's definitely some things that make me think this card could be playable. I think it's better than the first version, Tree of... Oh, God.
I don't even remember the first
I can't think of it
version.
now. But it was the same card, except it gained up to 13 life instead of going down to it. So a Tree of Redemption it was.
Tree of Redemption, there we go.
So I think it's better than that one, and I could imagine a world where there was a real deck that wanted to play this card.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed everything I was going to say about this card. There's really not much for me to say other than the obvious interaction of Triskaidekaphobia, which seems sweet. I don't know if that will be a thing, but it's certainly something that's worth exploring.
I will make it a thing, Chess.
Well,
I will make it a thing.
Yeah, you're going to explore it. I think everyone knows that. But yeah, obviously the flavor is insane here. It's awesome to see a different take on Tree of Redemption is kind of now this raggedy dead tree. And it's a huge blocker, so maybe it gets there. So I'm interested to see where this goes. There's some really weird interactions with other cards, and like you said, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
Now for the millionth take on Kicker, we have our first Escalate card. This is Collective Brutality. So Chaz, take it away.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned Kicker. Yeah, it is kind of a new take on Kicker, but it's still interesting. Collective Brutality seems like it's the best one of these of this cycle, especially because discarding cards is likely good in a lot of different archetypes that want to play this. Each mode is good on its own for 2 converted mana cost, so I think that's kind of already baseline good, and anything above just one mode is gravy.
Yeah, I can see a lot of applications for this card. Obviously, the dream scenario is you play it on turn 2, kill a Duskwatch Recruiter, and steal your opponent's collected company, for example, while discarding a prized amalgam or something along those lines.
Right.
But I think that there's a lot of value to be had here, and it does a lot for 2 mana. And like you said, all the things that it does are not on par with a 2 mana card, but they're close enough. Like 2 mana for a Disfigure effect, 2 mana for a pseudo duress effect, and the drain effect. They're not that much overcosted if you're only getting 1 mode, and when you're getting 2 or 3 modes, it's really insane.
Yeah. And like we said, this we'll have to see how much better Madness and Delirium look after Eldritch Moon. I think they both look a lot better, so obviously this is a great engine for both of those abilities. And like you said, yeah, it's a little under par. I think I kind of over-exaggerated that, but it's good enough that each of the individual modes for just 2 mana is fine, and like you said, everything above that is gravy, or even great if you can unlock all the modes.
Yeah, I imagine most of the time you really want the first 2. Like, those are the 2
Yes.
that really jump out. If you can get the Pseudo Duress and the Disfigure, that's a pretty good card for 2 mana plus, even if you're discarding just an extra land. The Drain mode
Right.
doesn't really excite me, but if you can do it for 2 consistently, I think this card could be playable.
Yep.
Up next, we have my spoiler card. This is
Yeah.
Cryptbreaker, Heritage Zombie. What do you think, Chaz?
I don't know how you feel about revealing a non-blue card, and especially an aggressive card. So, but I think this is one of my favorite cards in the set, and not just because it's your spoiler card. Don't get ahead of yourself there, Seth. But no, this card has a lot of plays, and I just think back to the first Innistrad block where we saw Gravecrawler, and that was like insane for a 1-drop for the zombie list, and I think this is just as good because it's doing things that you want to do in a zombie list. You're putting cards into the graveyard that inevitably will come back. You're getting creatures out of that ability, and again, we talk about Madness and Delirium, and then the second ability is just insane, and it plays so well with another card that we're about to talk about.
Yeah, I think Cryptbreaker, I mean, I broke it all down in the spoiler article,
Right.
but I think this card is legitimately good. I've got to spoil a couple cards now, and if you've ever read my spoiler articles, you know I'm not the type of person that is going to say a card is good just because it's a spoiler article. If I don't think it's good, I'm gonna be nice about it, but I'm gonna say that I don't think it's playable. I do think this card is playable, and I express that in the
absolutely.
article. So if there's a zombie deck in Standard, I am very sure Cryptbreaker will be a key part of it.
Yep, absolutely. And if you haven't read the spoiler article, you should, because it was a really great breakdown and pretty much echoes everything we're talking about here. But
Well, Black does have a lot of zombie cards, and
Yep.
our next one is Dark Salvation. A really interesting design. I want to hear your take on this, Chaz.
I love this card. And like I just said with Cryptbreaker, this is the card that it plays so well with because on curve, you can play cards like Cryptbreaker, Relentless Dead into Dark Salvation, and for 3 mana, you basically get to kill any 2 power creature or 2 toughness creature rather, on turn 3, which is pretty good, and you get a 2/2 black zombie into play, which you can then use on turn 3 with your Cryptbreaker already. So, I mean, if this doesn't make it into a zombie deck, I would be insanely surprised.
Yeah, it looks expensive because of the double X spell.
Right.
But when you consider that in a zombie deck, it also becomes like a dismember almost. It doesn't cost you life because you can cast it for a single mana and give something negative X equal to the number of zombies you control. So it's a pretty powerful removal spell, even if you can't make a ton of zombies. This is, of course, assuming you're playing a deck that's playing a bunch of zombies. And then in the late game, when you can randomly make, I don't know, 3 zombies by paying 7 mana, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a 2-for-1 or maybe a 3-for-1 out of this card. So I think this is definitely a key piece of a zombie deck, but it won't see play outside of zombies. Speaking of zombies that are not very good,
Yeah.
we have our first intro pack rare, Noosegraf Zombie. It's big, it does counters, it does some random things, but it's pretty horrible, right?
Yeah, so Noosegraf Mob is, we're saying goodbye to intro pack rares, so it's sad to see them go, but at the same time not really, because we don't get to see or have to talk about intro pack rares anymore, Seth. So it's all right. I obviously not constructed viable, but you never know. It is a enter the battlefield ability, so it does come into play with the counters, and I guess if you need this to multiply into multiple zombies, it's fine. I don't know. Again, outside of constructed, maybe there's a shot, but I don't know where in constructed you would see this.
I don't think anywhere.
No, probably not. So, trying to hype up an intro pack rare, I always want to at least give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's just not too exciting.
I'm pretty sure we'll talk about more intro pack rares, but I think
Yes,
this
we
might
will.
be near the bottom of the intro pack rares from the set.
There's actually one really good intro pack rare, but it's not this one. So,
Well,
unfortunate.
speaking of cycles, we have kind of the completion of a cycle that started a couple sets ago. This is
Yeah.
Oath of Liliana.
Cool that Liliana's deciding to join the party. I guess we kind of have to form Voltron, but for those of you that get that reference, it's okay. I think for 3, everyone sacrificing a creature is fine. Obviously, it gets better when there's a multiplayer scenario like an EDH or something like that. And the Planeswalker trigger is pretty good as well. I don't know where it ranks among the other oaths, but it's probably up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oath of Nissa has clearly proven to be
Yes.
by far number 1. And then there's kind of a big pile underneath with the
Yeah.
next ones. I think Oath of Liliana has definitely got to be in that second group. It's not anywhere near Oath of Nissa. As a 3-mana sorcery speed edict, I'm not a huge fan of it. We already have instant speed
Yeah.
3-mana edicts. So I think it's a card that you really need to be able to trigger the zombie mode multiple times over the course of the game for it to be good. If you're not playing any planeswalkers, there's almost literally
Zero
zero
incentive.
reason to play
Yeah.
this over something else. If you have 4 or 6 or 8 planeswalkers, then you're making a zombie when you play a planeswalker, which is another way to protect your planeswalker because you can block with the zombie. Then I kind of like it. So I think that is the determining factor, is how many planeswalkers do you got in your deck.
Yeah, absolutely. It is splashable, so if there is kind of any super friends list that wants to include black, then I think you're right. When you're playing a high density of planeswalkers, this obviously gets a lot better. When you're not playing a lot of planeswalkers, this is next to useless.
Moving away from zombies, we're now entering our last couple cards, which are both vampires.
Yep.
So we have Stromkirk Condemned, a 2-drop, enables madness, lets you fill your graveyard, and has some benefit in a zombie or a vampire deck rather, because it can anthem up your team for a turn.
Yeah, I think this is one of those, and I think the theme here in Eldritch Moon is another one of these like deceptively powerful cards. I don't know what the curve is looking like in vampires after Eldritch Moon, or if they're even still viable after Eldritch Moon, but it looks like a really solid 2-drop that, and I'm a sucker for aggressive creatures that aren't duds later in the game. So Stromkirk Condemned is definitely in that category of it can still play a role later in the game, and you can discard late game lands or just madness out any kind of card later in the game that you want to madness, or if you don't need the land, and you can just anthem your creatures.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. My only concern with it is Falconwrath Gorger.
Yeah.
The best one drop for the vampire deck is red. Also, Insolent Neonate, which randomly sees play as a one drop in those decks, is red. So it puts a really big tax on your mana to go red one drop into double black two drop.
Yep.
So that worries me a little bit. I think it would be better if there was a mono black vampire build. But overall, it's a good card, and I really like free discard outlets. So I think it could possibly see some play just because being able to discard things like Fiery Temper for free is a pretty powerful thing to do.
Yeah, I honestly think this is better not being dropped on turn 2 more than if you have a way to discard immediately and pump your team rather than trying to put this on out at turn 2. I don't know if there's anything else better than this on turn 2, unfortunately, but it just, again, without having that curve, it's just a vanilla 2/2. So, and again, like you said, the color restraint. But later on in the game, it becomes much more potent.
All right, we're going to wrap up our black cards with one more vampire, another horror as well. Lots of horrors in this set. Voldaren Pariah, which flips around into Abolisher of Bloodlines. If you sack 3 creatures, is a trigger for transforming. So take it away, Chaz.
It has Madness for 3, which seems a lot better than casting it for 5. I do like the fact that its transform is instant and you can just sack for 3 creatures whenever you want. I actually like this card a lot more after I've sat and looked at it after a while. I initially didn't really like it, but it seems like obviously the dream is if you're sacrificing 3 creatures that you don't really care about, you basically get their best 3 creatures, hopefully, and you have a large flying creature that can tango with a lot of the large flying creatures in this set. It contends with Gisela, it contends with Avacyn, so that's something to think about. Being able to madness it out for triple black is obviously great if you can do that.
Speaking of madnessing out for triple black, it kind of curves with Stromkirk Condemned. If you play that on turn 2, discard this for free if you're mono black vampires. And then there's some matchups where being able to transform is going to be really good. If you're playing against like green-white tokens, you're probably not going to get much value making them sack 3 creatures. But against like an Eldrazi deck, for example, any of the ramp decks, if you're hitting like big 4 or 5, 6 mana creatures while you're sacking your 1-drops or some tokens, that's a lot of value.
Yeah, even against like collected company lists, 3 creatures is kind of a lot. Obviously, they can refill their battlefield a lot quicker and fairly efficiently, but the Voldaren Pariahs, I think, could be up there as like a high-end curve, more of like a green-black aristocrats type list that we've seen, especially at like the Pro Tour with Louis Scott Vargas, where you just have all these little knick-knack creatures that can be sacrificed later in the game, like Loam Dryad or something like that. It can trigger your Zulaport Cutthroat. And that's kind of where I envision this fitting into those strategies.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So that wraps up the black section of our set review. So like yesterday, Chaz, what do you got for your favorite black card?
I think mine will be better, different than yours, but I love your spoiler card, Cryptbreaker. It just seems insane to me. And it's just a really great 1-drop that has tons of value at every point in the game.
Yeah, I like Cryptbreaker as well, but it's no competition for the tree. Tree of Perdition is just so sweet, and I know I'm going to be playing it a lot, and anything that lets me win really jankily with Triskaidekaphobia is going to be near the top of my list. So
if anyone can find a viable way to make that happen, it's you. So I can totally agree with your pick on that one. And hey, maybe it's not that janky. Who knows?
Oh, all right. So that has been the black section of our Eldritch Moon set review. Make sure to stop back by tomorrow when Chaz will join me again to break down all the red cards from the set. So Chaz, thanks for hanging out, and I will talk to you tomorrow.
Anytime. This has been fun. Thanks everyone for joining us.